Welcome to the Beyond Bitcoin Community Dev Hangout. This show was recorded on Saturday, June 14th, 2014. The Beyond Bitcoin Community Dev Hangout show is a loosely based show with no leaders. We are a free-form discussion group that encourages anyone to join. If you have any sort of innovative project, or if you would just like to show up and challenge Dan Larimer of BitShares on any of his thoughts, then please join us on our Mumble server on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Central Time.
If there were plans for scripting features and or similar possibilities in the BitShares toolkit for the upcoming DPOS-based blockchains.
Plans, yes, but certainly mostly daydreaming right now. I spent a little bit of time just looking at scripting languages. It looks like with our design, it'd be very easy to implement Ethereum-style contracts in our system.
Well, I was thinking a bit about more, not maybe complete Turing complete or almost Turing complete contracts, but more like that you can add a little bit more functionality to DAX, more autonomous behavior in it, like honoring a deal or something, or I don't know if Fastness had a plan for something like a very complex plan with a lotto deck and giving out rewards to several coin holders, but if you don't have any way of doing that automatically, that won't work. So I was wondering if there were some plans to add a little bit of scripting features on top of the DPOS chain, not necessarily a very complex one.
I think our plan is to grow the toolkit to enable everything over time. We want to focus on core functionality and the core contracts, which is the BitShares X contracts, the DNS contracts, and then expand from there.
I saw something on the GitHub. It looked like there was, maybe I misinterpreted it, something about voting on proposals. I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah, so we needed a system out there for doing alerts like Bitcoin has. So developer alerts, in security, bug found, upgrade now kind of thing. We didn't want to have the developers have a monopoly over that private key. So instead, we set up a system where any delegate can create a proposal, which is really just a subject body type and arbitrary data, and broadcast it to the network. And other delegates can vote on these proposals by doing a similar transaction up, down, and give a reason why. Then all the clients out there can display alerts to users based upon some threshold of, enough delegates agree that yes, this is a security alert. Yes, people should upgrade. So it was a relatively straightforward thing to implement and gave us an alert system in the process. It also gives us a way to handle fork management. If we hard fork management. If we want to change the protocol in some way after we've done the official launch, then someone will submit a proposal. The code will check to see when the proposal is ratified and then activate the new branch.
I had maybe a similar idea about why not have a system that sort of extends that to everybody rather than just delegates, where anybody can just register a random statement and it's just listed like anything else, like names or whatever, and then people can vote up or down. Obviously, it's just non-binding. It's just people can sort of poll the stake. Poll. You get an idea of how everybody as a whole, based on their stake, feels about a particular subject or statement.
What you're talking about is a general purpose commenting system, and I thought about extending it to that. It wouldn't be very hard to do so. So I definitely like that idea. I like the ability to have people attach a comment to any object in the system. whether it's a block, a transaction, a proposal, an asset, or another comment that would give you an entire hierarchical form on the blockchain for any client that's able to parse all those comments out.
Is the VPS with 1 gigabyte enough to run the current software?
You might have a hard time compiling. Apparently, G++ uses a lot of RAM when compiling, and so it will crash the compiler, and you won't even be able to get it built. I suppose if you built it on another machine and copied it over. Let me see the stats on my own computer. 1 second.
The client hardly uses anything, and maybe with the caching system on the hard drive, with the swap or something, could work.
Yeah, you'd want a VPS with a solid state drive. And right now I'm using 46 megabytes of memory on my client. Now, this is not a very active network, so there's not a lot of level DB caching for all the records that it's looked up. I've seen it go as high as a couple 100 megabytes in heavy testing.
Yeah, I just bought a real cheap VPS, but I can double the price and get 2 gigabytes and so forth. I was just curious how that would work.
Well, if the 4 gigabyte ones aren't very expensive either, and I live in a very expensive country.
Yeah, I just have a tendency to buy these things, and then I just keep subscribing and costing me money. So I try to start out on the low end of the cost.
And why don't you just compile on your own system and just transfer it to the VPS?
Not sure about the binary compatibility.
Well, we can figure out binary distributions for these things. Obviously, that will probably work early on, but I don't think it's going to be a problem if you're going to run a node on the network and become a delegate in the long run. We've been putting a lot of thought into ideas on this front.
Has anyone used the, was it Vagrant, the person posted? It's some sort of a system to kick off an instance of the delegate?
No, I've only been trying to compile on different Linux versions. Besides, I haven't been successful so far. I keep running into little things.
So, like that kid said, you're talking that kid about providing people with like an instant snapshot, like a file that they can open up in a virtual system.
No, there's some other open source software. I think it was called Vagrant, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go reread the post, and some user who doesn't post a lot in the forums had created it, and it allows someone to fire off an instance on DigitalOcean, Amazon Web Services, or VirtualBox, and I was just curious if anyone had an experience with that. I've been wanting to look at it, but I just have a lot of things to do myself.
Well, it's been really tough to keep up with the changes right now. It's kind of a you better be compiling it from source because there are frequent updates.
Yeah, I noticed. So I don't see a way now seeing how fast you update or you would get a binary out. You need to compile it almost every day.
Yeah, we are hoping to get the nightly build so that you can just download from there. But right now there are bugs, and so until we have a system that is operating without any significant bugs that we can detect, it's probably best to keep agile, for at least for the people that are doing it now. I think once that's proven, we'll be able to get systems like that in place. Ideally, the way it would work is the people who want to be delegates will be separate from the people who are running the nodes. So if someone with a solid public reputation and integrity says, hey, I may need to be a delegate, and he'll pay someone to run the node for him. So there's going to be lots of division of labor and responsibility here. So you don't have to have nerdy engineers campaigning to become a delegate, or this way people like Adam Levine can, become a delegate, and his reputation's on the line, and he can hire someone else to run the node for him.
How would that work?
Right. So I'd like to run a high-level idea by you guys and see what you think of this. Imagine you have a company, and this company is just starting off and it's got no capital whatsoever. But you've got 100 people that are all starting this company together. So they all work day in and day out trying to grow the company, and they would normally expect to get a lot of equity stake in the company for all their effort. So I think that DAX should pay delegates like Bitcoin does, on the order of 10% or more of the share supply every year, divided among the delegates. If that was the case, then each delegate would make $1 million a year to be allocated according to however they campaign. They could choose to give it back as basically destroy it, or they could choose to fund development or marketing or charity or some combination, whatever can get them elected and stay elected. And then they can pay themselves and pay a technical guy to run the node, whatever the market will tolerate.
I like the incentives. I've heard or read mention of that in the forum, and it didn't quite get it. But just now, after listening to you, actually, I like that. I mean, the incentives, getting the delegates to do marketing and so forth, it really would help the DAX and bring in people that are interested in. I don't know. Sounds great.
What it really is like is it funds long-term development and maintenance of the company until the transaction fees are enough to offset the amount the delegates are being paid.
I do have another question, if I may. If you do this, you have to decide the percentage or the amount at the start of the DAC, I suppose. Is there a way to alter that later on? Is the blockchain mutable, so you can change it after the fact, after to change according to what the wishes of the delegates and the shareholders?
That's what the proposal system I talked about earlier is for. If you want to change it, you can. Although I think that avoiding price fixing is important. So I would highly encourage people to leave the delegate pay at whatever it is and have the delegates voluntarily destroy the funds, and the shareholders to elect delegates that will destroy the funds as the way of adjusting how much they get paid.
Here's my thoughts on it. I completely agree with you about the idea of having a very pro-growth strategy and sort of reinvesting that 10% a year or whatever it is for growth. I feel like there's maybe some unnecessary overlap with assigning 100 people to 100 delegates and say, okay, well, these are the guys that should get this 10%, and those people will be in charge of spending that in a way that best benefits all the shareholders. I just feel like there may be people like you said with Adam Levine. There may be people that are not technical. There may be some people that are great as delegates that aren't necessarily great in these other roles, and having them sort of try to cooperate with somebody. I think a more elegant solution is kind of what I propose with employees, where almost anybody could participate, by vote of everybody in getting funds to grow. Whether that's Adam gets funds because he's going to be a big, proponent on his show or whatever, or a developer, like you would just get, people would be like, okay, well, we're going to give Invictus and Bytemaster directly 10% per year just because we trust them to, invest in development rather than making you set up delegates. And anyway, that's my thought on it.
Could you clarify the last part just a little bit?
I think what he's saying is that the tying of running a node with being an employee is an unnecessary tie. That if we had a way of assigning funds to any person who's registered in the blockchain for any reason, then we could work with that.
It seems to me that partnerships could form to alleviate that problem. Like you could have, whoever the marketing guy, he could partner with several delegates as part of their proposal, and it would fix what agents' concerns seem to be.
Yeah, he's suggesting that people shouldn't have to partner to do this, and I'm suggesting that if you're a technical guy who knows how to run a server, you don't want to do the campaigning, and you probably can't get the visibility necessary to get the job. And on the other hand, if the people that are really good at campaigning and getting these types of positions might not necessarily be the best ones for running a node, so they'd end up having to pay someone anyway to run it for them. It also helps divide things up. Like, I would rather be paid by a delegate than be a delegate and get paid. It's much cleaner that way.
So you think there's going to be generally like a little microcosm that builds up around each delegate, with the delegate funding the growth of the infrastructure, the marketing campaigns, all the other stuff that would go into that. And then that would be like a form of competition between them over time that would benefit all of them.
Right. I view the delegate positions as 100 small companies rather than 100 individuals.
So it's almost, and pardon me for the analogy, but it's almost like saying there's going to be 100 different ASIC manufacturers out there. The difference here is that it's going to be based on community trust and all that good stuff, as opposed to your pure raw hash power. And all of you guys are going to be competing for trust and efficiency in the network.
A delegate that's managed by a small company is more reliable than a delegate managed by an individual.
Okay, I'll say another two things about it too. Like, it seems like that might mean that it would be difficult for delegates to remain anonymous. And the other thing I would have is, you said, well, maybe Adam can campaign on behalf of a delegate or partner with a delegate. But I don't necessarily think that even if people trust Adam, that trust, if he's not technical, that trust transfers. Adam, no matter who Adam hires as a delegate, he has no way, if he's not technical himself, that trust doesn't transfer because he has no way of checking on his delegate to make sure that that delegate is trustworthy.
It's a question of who are you trusting with what. In this case, you are trusting Adam to make budgetary decisions to pay all the people he said he was going to pay with the proceeds of the delegate. And you're just trusting the technical guy to keep the node running and to have high reliability. It should even be possible to set it up so that the technical guy that's running the node doesn't even have access to the private key.
Okay, I think I like the sound of that a little bit better.
Well, and DPOS itself would get rid of bad actors just as part of the protocol if that delegate was misbehaving, correct? So essentially all that has to transfer is anybody. We can talk about Adam, but we can talk about pretty much anybody who wants to do this. The level of trust that comes along with them is going to be the trust that is connected to their ID from their past actions with regard to paying the people that are underneath them, or that they've hired, rather.
Right. It's really a question of campaign trust. Now, you could be an anonymous delegate and earn an anonymous reputation and do all that stuff anonymously.
Satoshi did.
Yeah. Although eventually your server might be discovered because people are amazingly adept at doing network analysis, even though every single one of our connections is encrypted. But I suppose if you wanted to, you could run behind Tor and hope that you have low latency and high enough bandwidth to do the job. But I think that this really sets a new standard for how things can be done in the entire system. Next is growing like gangbusters, but as far as I can tell, the only people that can profit from this are the initial shareholders in Next. And so they're working to grow their stake. But right now, there's no way for someone who doesn't have any stake to make any money promoting Next. They have to buy in before they even start working. So they don't get reimbursed for their time unless the original founders agree to pay them.
I totally agree. I think it's difficult for them to grow if they don't have a way of bringing in new people in a realistic way. Eventually, people will their stake will get smaller, and they won't, and it'll be hard for them to care enough.
What do you guys think? Well, let me go ahead and look at this next one then. Would Bytemaster be prepared to talk about the future plans beyond the first DAX that he mentioned having a couple times? Can he lift the tip of the veil of his grand strategy of where he would like things to go in the future? That would presumably need functional digital money, BTSX, and some techno demo DAX first.
I think this is the same thing I've been talking about for the past 6 months. We've got 5 different DAX, I believe. We've got BitShares X, that's the bank and exchange. We've got BitShares Me, BitShares Music. I'm working with Follow Your Vote at Virginia Tech with a partnership on a voting DAC. So that's really exciting there.
That's really cool. Can we hear a little bit about it?
Virginia Tech is trying to grow and sponsor an entire community in the Blacksburg area. And I've been a part of that community for 10 years since I left Tech. That's what the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center is. They have all these incubators for small companies. So Tech recently started a new thing called New Spark, NU Spark. And it's kind of like a incubator for small companies that don't have any money, but gives them free office space. And it also works with the university to find talent and other resources. One of the companies in New Spark is interested in doing something with voting to make democracy and government more fair. You know how I feel about voting, but it's nonetheless a legitimate approach in the eyes of most people, and it's just something that needs more transparency. If you're going to do it, let's do it honestly. And so I've been pitching to them the Lotto DAC based upon, sorry, not the Lotto DAC, the voting DAC based upon Zerocoin technology. They really like the potential and think it's much better than some of their original business plans. And so they've been coming on board. They've got a developer who's looking into Zerocoin and BitShares and is going to start working on that kind of thing. So what we're really trying to do is partner with them. I'm going to have meetup here in Blacksburg, hosted by NewSpark, to introduce students and entrepreneurs in the area to Bitcoin technology or beyond Bitcoin technology, and really try to grow that entire startup hub here. This can be the Silicon Valley of crypto stuff if this grows. And it seems like the people at Tech are very excited about getting into this. They see the huge potential of crypto technologies to change everything. They see how it's cross-disciplinary. They want to work with me to produce a curriculum in this area. So it's really exciting stuff going on with Tech.
Can I ask you where this curriculum you see? Because trying to tie this into actually what Joe was asking when he says, can you lift the tip of the veil on your grand strategy, where this will go in the future? How do you see something like this working into that grand strategy? Because it seems like you're already placing your chips there, like that's something that's important to you.
The grand strategy is to get crypto technologies widely accepted with extreme legitimacy based on promoting their use as a transparent accounting system that eliminates fraud, and to apply that to businesses, both centralized and decentralized businesses, and as well as governments. So working with Tech and trying to get other startups to go is part of what we're trying to do. It's what we said we were going to do 6 months ago. And, it's just these things take a long time to develop.
So it almost seems like this type of stuff, because we've heard about an airdrop. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but I have. The airdrop of Bitcoin at MIT to the MIT students. It's very interesting, the parallels between how the internet kind of started up. Have you ever thought about the possible connection of like where mainframes used to be in university settings at first, primarily, actually seeing delegates form around these universities?
It'd be a great way for university to raise money to fund their research.
And essentially they could bootstrap an entire industry or subject with subject matter within their school and pay for all of the research and the students and everything else.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are really excited about it, and they see the potential, and everyone's racing to figure out how to incorporate Bitcoin and the not just Bitcoin, but the technology it represents into their curriculum. So we're going to start with a few lectures and invite them to some Bitcoin conferences and try to figure out what the content of a course in this stuff would be.
I have a question about maybe the long-term funding of Invictus. I know you've said that the AGS funds might last for about a year, and I'm wondering what the strategy is, because I would love to see Invictus and just your team and the development team, be able to grow to be like 100 employees in a couple years or whatever more. And I know you guys had a meeting with like venture capitalists in St. Martin or something, and I'm wondering if you guys have a thought plan of how to incorporate new money into the business strategy in sort of a, obviously in a transparent way that's fair to current investors and all that.
Our strategy is to offer development services to DAX, and this is part of the reason why we want delegates to be paid well.
You said you wanted to provide, delegate services or development services to DAX?
Development services. So the delegates go out there campaigning, hey, elect me a delegate, and I'll pay X amount to development, this much to marketing, and so on. and I would like to grow the number of people providing these types of services dramatically. So if people want to pay me, they pay me. If there's other people like Nikolai or Toast that they want to pay, they can pay him. But it's not one gigantic Invictus is the new Microsoft mentality. But instead, we have created a revenue stream and a source of delegate compensation that can fund our individual developments.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's the way to go. Again, I'm not sold on conflating the idea of delegates versus just, a developer that could get paid directly, but I agree that's a good way to look at growth.
Well, any developer is technically capable to run a delegate, so
yeah, sure.
I think that for the most part, developers can get a job like that. It's the marketing guys that would probably have a harder time doing it all on their own.
Sure. And you don't think there would ever be any legal issues that delegates would need to protect themselves and remain anonymous?
I can never predict the legal framework, but I think that how a DAC markets and promotes itself has some impact. So we are looking at calling things something other than shares. Conceptually, we can think of them as shares from an economic perspective, but from the perspective of marketing, what the SEC cares about is how you market, not what things are.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So what would work? Things like chips or tickets?
Or, these are just my ideas. The marketing team has other ideas, but every DAC would have different things. So the DNS DAC would have dots. The voting DAC would have votes. The so we won't call them the same thing. Everyone will brand their coin something. Like if you had like a Twitter DAC, they could be I don't know, feathers or something. I don't know.
Well, it kind of plays into the old school days of barter, and it's very interesting to see how that goes. I mean, there was a time when there were thousands of different currencies that all flowed amongst each other that weren't fiat, so being able to nickname your tokens like shells, or like Joey said, chips, or any number of other things, and then trade them. It kind of
moolah, or how much dough?
Or ears,
donuts.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask you go through the subreddit real quick and finish off on these questions, if you guys don't mind. Is there any reason why this would be unnecessary, or because I think I know where we are now.
Go ahead.
Actually, this one comes from me. It would be nice to talk about Ghash.io's 50% control, and yet again, your prophetic analysis, which was quoted by Leon Donnie here. And I'll go ahead and just give like a real quick run through here. Just a part of the quote. It says, at the Inside Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, the CEO of Butterfly Labs did a presentation on the future of mining. In his presentation, he pointed out that about 5 people collectively control 75% of the hashing power behind Bitcoin, and 2 people control over 51%. He then made the case that this centralization was good for Bitcoin because it means they could coordinate to rapidly resolve unexpected forks such as the one that occurred in March 2013. According to Sonny Flasides, I'm sorry if I messed that up, Without this centralization in mining, Bitcoin would have died 9 months ago, as decentralized clients would have been unable to reach consensus on which fork to follow in a timely manner. And then he goes down the final paragraph. I'm not going to read all of it, but he says the fact that mining results in centralization should not have been a surprise to those who understand economies of scale. Mining profitability is a function of efficiency, and large centralized mining farms powered by the latest capital-intensive ASICs, packaged and cooled in an industrial setting, will eventually push all profitable mining into the hands of a single player. Effectively, mining means that consensus is defined by an organization that can drive profits from alternative revenue streams such as taxation, tainted coins, or limiting transactions to privileged players. It means that in the name of progress, these large miners will support other changes to the protocol that also benefit from economies of scale, such as reducing block intervals, increasing block sizes, and offering instant transaction validation services. We have come to the conclusion that there is no proof of work system that can provide security and decentralization at the same time. A new approach is needed. So, with that, we talk a little bit about that, and it's the reason why I bring it up and why I thought it was important is because there have been a few things that you've talked about for a long time, and people gave you a tough time about it. And we start seeing over the course of developments in the crypto sphere, they're starting to come to the same conclusions that you did seemingly months ago. What's your take on it? And please don't take that as butt kissing, but pretty much anybody here can validate this.
Oh, from my perspective, it's just self-evident. But I guess it's not entirely self-evident because I started out in the mining camp. 8 months ago, I was still trying to do PTS with the momentum proof of work. So it's really a question of, can you imagine something better? And a lot of people can't imagine anything better. And it's the lack of imagination that's the single biggest thing that's holding a lot of people back.
It makes sense, and it brings back to the conversation that you were talking about, that you gentlemen were talking about earlier, regarding the question of delegates being paid 10%, and then later on being able to come up with their value proposition and the methods by which they earn your trust. That seems like. Go ahead.
I find it a bit suspect that, Ghash has a 0% pull fee. I understand that they have a large, and I don't know how large, not pool, but their own mining equipment that they sell access to. But then they also have the pool on top of that, and that pool has a 0% fee. And it's always seemed kind of sketchy to me and their motives. I understand that it helps their other business, but at some point it seems like they would try to keep their percentage, far from 50%, so that it doesn't give all this bad press to Bitcoin, because I think it ends up hurting the top of the market cap, because people read this 51% FUD and, justifiably are concerned about the security of the whole system. The Ghash could probably fix this by, enacting a small fee so that because they're not making money off of their pool, so why not just charge people a little bit and maybe force them to go to one of the other pools? The whole thing is just kind of strange to me. I'm not really sure what their goal is. I understand that it helps advertising, but anyway.
Well, let's just put it this way. I identified earlier that you could take over Bitcoin by promising to upgrade it in some useful way, creating a mining pool that charges a negative fee, and getting all the miners on your pool. And you can even pay your negative fee with shares in the new chain after you plan to do the fork. Any miners who disagree with your 51% once you reach 51%, any miners who disagree, you ignore their blocks, and but they have no choice but to adopt your stuff or stop getting paid. And considering they've got a large investment in mining, they'd have to come on board if they want to recoup their investment. So this having a 0% fee is and a large amount of base power is also a way of achieving the same goal. Right now, GigaHash has the ability to dictate future. I guess they have the ability to resolve any fork single-handedly. They do not have the ability, however, to define what those forks are going to be without the Bitcoin community's wider consensus. If they decide that they're going to introduce tainted coins, the value will plummet and an altcoin will come up. So I think this is really a demonstration of the fact that mining is providing no value. GigaHash could simply be signing the blocks, and you would be receiving the same benefit for the entire Bitcoin network. So if people are willing to trust GigaHash, then why don't they trust them with just their signature instead of throwing $1 billion?
So this kind of goes back to the delegate system. It seems to me like it almost seems like the incentives are already there in the Bitcoin infrastructure to secure the network and create something like this. Because, I mean, to me, there's a lot of different ways to benefit from this, even though you're not necessarily gaining anything in transaction fees, for instance. There's nothing keeping you from quietly investing in other coins and then that won't be affected by a 51% attack as easily, and then sometime just pulling the rug out underneath me, and having investments in coins that are not going to be affected by 51% attacks. It seems like you've actually placed, with using DPOS, you've essentially taken that factor out, that a delegate could easily charge 0 transaction fees, or could actually even pay out in transaction fees, and that still isn't going to be the only measure by which their validity as signatory would be accepted. Yeah,
right, because consensus is based upon all the shareholders having a net agreement that this person should be trusted. And if there's a large negative contingent, they can basically prevent anybody from getting elected. So you have to have all positive and very little negative in order to be a delegate.
Gotcha.
I also think what you just said about you can just move to another coin. I think one of the smart things about what Bitch has done is just deal with the reality that centralization will happen and just go from there, from trying to regulate centralization instead of trying to deny it.
It's the whole decentralized religion. Decentralization is a tactic that is meant to make the system resilient from attack. So you want to be decentralized in the sense of there's no single point of failure, but decentralized in terms of control is, well, it depends on how you define it. So basically, ability to adapt, I think, is the number one thing, and no barriers to entry. As long as the network can adapt, then it's resistant. And there's also decentralization in roles and responsibility. So you don't have to have all parties doing the same thing. But, it's kind of the separation of powers.
And this is an interesting point, because this goes back to a lesson I'm sure you'll remember, Bytemaster. It was one of the first times we sat down and we all had this this community session, that we really you felt it was very important for us to sit down and talk about what decentralization is, like the definition of decentralization and how it applies to these systems. And you made a really good point to me there are different places where decentralization applies best, and like for instance, decentralization of power, like you said. There's different places where that decentralization can help or hinder with regard to like the mechanisms in the system. Does that make sense?
Right. You have redundancy. That's one type of centralization, and then you have division of control. And so with our delegates, they don't actually have much control. The worst they can do is freeze things. They can't double spend. They can't do arbitrary changes to the blockchain. They can't front run people. So there's a lot of things they can't do, and the only thing they can do is behave. Yeah, it's also the concept that the way you have law and order in society is not the severity of the punishment, but the probability of getting caught. If you have 100% chance of getting caught for murder, and the punishment is relatively small in comparison to what it is today, it still wouldn't happen as much. But because there's a probability of getting away with it, it doesn't matter how bad the punishment is. People take the gamble. So the key is to design systems that are transparent, that have 100% probability of getting caught, and then have the ability to minimize damages when they do get caught doing whatever it is that we don't want them to do. And those are all the things that we've done with delegated proof of stake. There's 100% probability of getting caught if you don't include transactions. And the most damage you can do is temporary, and it's quickly resolved. And then the cost is your opportunity. You had a nice, highly paid position, and now you don't. All those things conspire to give you a system that you can actually trust.
Now, and how, I hate to go back to this, but I have heard the criticism, and I think it's incorrect. But it is floating out there, comparisons between DPOS and Ripple. Where does this, I would like to help the audience and the people who do listen to this see the difference between what you're doing and what Ripple has done with essentially regarding these things.
With Ripple, there's no way for the people who hold Ripple to decide which nodes are running the network. There's no way for the people who hold Ripple to fire the core node set up by Ripple Labs. Ripple Labs and their friends and associates will forever be in control unless they choose to give it control to someone else.
Okay, and so with that said, then essentially the only thing that you're getting from Ripple is the speed of transactions, which the people who've talked about this generally have ignored that, or have kind of just like thrown it in there as kind of like an afterthought. But that's essentially what you're gaining from this then over Ripple, from Ripple.
Well, Ripple is a completely different technology from what we're doing. What we gain is the ability to actually process transactions faster and more efficiently than Ripple.
Okay, so just to throw that away, touch on it and throw it away, basically, there's really no good analogy between DPOS and Ripple.
Only in the sense that there are a handful of trusted nodes responsible for validating transactions. Ripple has all these nodes work together to reach consensus at once by basically closing on a ledger every couple seconds after coordinating among the nodes. Whereas I had the nodes go take turns in a coordinated fashion. And then the one thing I do differently than Ripple is the selection of who these nodes are is decided by the shareholders, not by the current. If you wanted to make an analogy between delegated proof of stake and Ripple, it would be as if the initial delegates had to vote in any new delegate that's added, instead of the shareholders being able to.
And okay.
So if we set up our system so the delegates can vote to add a new delegate and can vote to kick a delegate out, that would be Ripple.
Gotcha. But this happens essentially automatically based on the level of trust that delegate receives from the system.
Right. As users make their transactions, their preferences will automatically be expressed in what we consider the most efficient manner. The algorithm we're currently using is if there's anyone you're voting against, anyone who you don't trust who's currently an active delegate, we vote against them. If there's more than one person you don't trust, we vote against whoever is closest to being voted out. And then if there's no one you don't trust in the top, in the active delegate list, then we vote for whoever you do trust that's lowest, that's closest to being voted in. So they're not in now, but they're the closest candidate. So you always vote to push people above or beyond the, in or out as quickly as possible.
Have you guys thought about, with regard to how these delegate systems are going to work, have we talked about, in general, like finding different industries that might be failing in certain degrees, and might benefit from this type of technology, and trying to get a hold of them and saying, hey, if your IT ran a delegate, if your IT people ran a delegate, they would actually essentially be able to make a good bit of money for your company on top of actually providing a service that is innovative for your users. Could that be a way of using this stuff?
We are looking at all kinds of ways of using stuff, that being one of them.
Cool. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is, when I just came up with listening to this, it's points back to the quote you had, Faznas, about centralization, meaning that they can resolve issues with the network and upgrade the network faster than a completely distributed one. So that's possibly one of the problems the BitShares ecosystem will have when it grows, because of all the voters being the powers. Updating the entire network might be a problem.
Well, to upgrade the entire network only requires the 100 delegates rather than the millions of users we hope to have. And that should be much faster because the delegates to get elected all are going to be communicating with each other and are going to be aware of anything that needs to happen. And any delegate that's not responsive is going to be quickly voted out, because in the aftermath of whatever happened, we'd say, well, why didn't this resolve? And say, well, these 10 delegates were non-responsive. And of course, 10 delegates is not enough. You have to have, 50+% not be responsive before it becomes an issue.
So it's very hard to accomplish this. I mean, to really cause that many problems.
The biggest problem we have is software bugs are the biggest risk.
The other question I had was looking at it from the other perspective, from the other extreme, is trying to make it as efficient and as possible, as fast as possible, also as energy efficient as possible. So you can make maybe portable solar-powered peer-to-peer connecting networks and just deploy them in areas where the infrastructure isn't there.
Could you explain that a little bit further, Joey?
Well, take for example areas where there is no internet or there's no reliable internet, like Gamey or other third world countries, and you want to put up a system though where a DAC would be useful, like property registration or trading system or a local market system. And if you can put up a system that works on solar power and just connects to cell phones or something, and that just works, that might be useful if the system is more efficient than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin needs connection to miners all over the world to just to get enough the hashing power to even operate. So I was just wondering if there were applications in the future for that to develop the whole world, not just the connected to the internet one.
Well, this technology fundamentally depends upon communication. I would love to see a world where the communication infrastructure is itself decentralized to the point where, because it's a broadcast architecture, all you really need is one radio station that's able to broadcast the blocks, and then a simple way to submit blocks to be broadcast. And assuming you had that, everyone can stay connected in a lightweight fashion, much more efficiently than how we're doing it now.
That's actually.
Would there be ways of actually? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a pretty interesting idea, the whole radio broadcasting, because I've had some thoughts of this myself, because it seems like, at least in some countries, that certain DACs could be censored if the internet infrastructure is highly controlled. For instance, China, and just, going way forward, what possibly could be done to mitigate that. And it's an interesting thought.
If you look at the bandwidth, something like a HD TV radio station or TV station, there's enough bandwidth there to broadcast the Bitcoin blockchain. So even at a scale larger than it is today, I think that would be a great model to go to for future applications. Of course, the internet seems to be working just fine as well, but having cell phones that can sit there and passively listen for the blockchain and just periodically send a small message to broadcast back is a big improvement over having to send the same packet multiple times to everything.
Now, how does this differ from, like, say, M-Pesa? How they or how does it apply to countries where things like M-Pesa are being used?
I think M-Pesa is a perfect example of how a digital currency can be developed in a centralized fashion and be perfectly reliable. I think Bitcoin's having a hard time competing with it because it already does everything people need.
And then I'm going to go ahead. If nobody else has any questions, let's go ahead and move on.
We're about an hour and 15 minutes into this, so we should wrap it up.
Sounds good. Well, I'll tell you guys, thank you for showing up. I'm going to start. I'm just going to let everybody know while you're here. I'm going to start. Saturdays are going to be probably my day for getting on here. I'm working on some schedule changes in the background here. So most of my stuff will probably be done on Saturdays. What I'm planning on doing is having after Bytemaster, having another hour session probably here and there with other people who are doing cool things, especially want to talk about things with DACs and people who are in the community doing cool things. So if you find somebody who's doing something really awesome in our community, please feel free to contact them and start something up yourself, or let them know that I'm more than willing to start something up after this for them. With that said, thank you everybody for showing up, and thank you, Dan, as always, for coming on here and keeping such a close ties with the community and talking to us regarding all the questions that we have. If anybody feels like, who's listening, who feels like they would like to ask Dan some questions, feel free to come to the subreddit or go to the subreddit and ask questions, or we'll log into our Mumble server during the time when Bytemaster is here. With that said, have a good one, guys.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.